Call the special meeting of the Fargo Park Board of Commissioners to order on Monday, January 13th at 3 o'clock. We have one item on the agenda, and that is statement of purpose of the special meeting for an executive director candidate interview. This item may be discussed in an executive session. The legal authority for closing this portion of the meeting is in North Dakota Century Code Section 44, TAC 04, TAC 19.2. And the topic, as I said, is the executive session is the interview of candidate Susan Faus. Do we have a motion to go to executive session?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Jeff, poll the board.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Popacek?
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch?
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted?
Yes. The motion passes. We will now move to executive session, which means we go next door.
My dad had to, fall. Oh, was your dad with you? Oh, well, okay, that's a whole different thing than you were with you.
So are you going to sit in on this van, or are you going to sit out?
Wasn't planning on it.
Because she's -%.
Did you see? She's like on the handle and she, I certainly can.
No, I'm not asking. I was just
Okay.
confirming.
No, it was not my plan.
All right. Great. Thank you. All right.
It's like the home stretch here.
Yeah. Save the best for last.
Yeah. It's like the home stretch here.
Yeah. Save the best for last.
Yeah.
So, you met everyone.
Yeah.
So I think we've got through that, and so maybe the format is about 10 or 15 minutes to talk about yourself, why you're interested, answer all those questions, and then we have, I think it was a total of 35 questions.
So just
We got a lot.
Up to.
just a few questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have to stop at 35?
They're all yes or no answers. Yeah, all right.
Perfect. I'm great
So
at
you
your calls.
can pace
Maybe
yourself.
works just fine.
Yeah.
So you can pace yourself,
Okay.
and we've got 2 hours set aside, but obviously if we get done earlier, if we go long,
Okay.
we're good to go. So.
Okay.
And we may pause through some of this because we have categories, but then we have questions within those.
Okay.
So it might take us a little bit of time to see exactly what question we want to answer, and we'll be taking notes soon, I'm sure.
Okay.
So similar to the
Sounds
first round, we just go around the horn with questions.
Okay.
So you'll get every angle attacked. So.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'll start out with the intro.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up in Cold Spring, Minnesota, which is right outside of St. Cloud, and completed my undergraduate at North Dakota State, and then went on and completed my master's degree at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. So I would consider my professional career started at the YMCA, where I held kind of various positions as I advanced in the organization. The first 6 years was in Lexington, and then the last 6 were in the Twin Cities. I found when I started to pick up a southern twang that I needed to go back and move back home to the Twin Cities. So I did that, and in all the positions that I had with the Y, I was responsible for staff supervision, all operations for the facilities, advertising and marketing, programming, and at the Y, fundraising. We had the annual fundraising campaign, so I played a lead role in some of those fundraising efforts. In 2012, I accepted a position with the City of Edina as the general manager at Edinburgh Park and the Aquatic Center. In that position, I led kind of the overall day-to-day operations of both facilities. I think I supervised 6 full-time employees in that position. And while there, I also was responsible for short and long-term business planning, budget preparation and management, any CIP, so capital improvement planning and projects for the facility. Again, the advertising, marketing of some of the programs in the facility. While in that role, so are you familiar with Edinburgh Park, anyone? Okay, so it's kind of a unique facility. It's really a private-public partnership. So the city owns the park portion, and then there is a like senior living facility, a business corporate center, and a hotel that are connected. So there's a kind of a partnership where those entities pay monthly association dues to help offset some of the operating costs. So the city, we were really looking at, and I kind of initiated it, is how can we really looking long term, how can we improve the overall financial sustainability at a neuro park? It was an inefficient facility, it was glass. So heating, cooling bills were huge, as well as, because it was an indoor park, there were large, like mature, huge trees indoor. And in order to keep those trees growing, we had to use metal halide lights, which very, very expensive. So I undertook an operational study where I really looked at all facets of operations and made some significant changes that helped to improve the efficiencies of the facility and also improve the long-term financial sustainability. When I first started, the facility lost approximately $300,000. In the next few years, and I wasn't there that long, but with the plan, we were able to lose, at one point we actually broke even, but generally between a $25,000 to $50,000 loss. So significant improvements to where we were. I was in that position for 10 months before I was promoted into the assistant director position in Edina. In that position, I had direct oversight over all of the enterprise facilities in Edina. The facilities included an ice arena, seasonal sports dome, outdoor refrigerated rink, golf course, golf dome, Edinburgh Park, aquatic center, art center, and senior center. And then I also was responsible for all programming, so all youth, adult, and our senior programming. I was really, I think, fortunate. It was a great time for me to be in Edina because there was a lot of support from the community and from overall leadership to make some investments into the park and some of the facilities. Edina was a city where a lot of deferred maintenance and a lot of the facilities were aging and starting to show some major holes. So we were able to, while I was there, I was part of the design and implementation of the new sports dome that I mentioned, and also that outdoor refrigerated rink piece. Was also involved in a master plan of our golf course operation, which was pretty significant. It resulted in a complete renovation of our par 3 course, a championship 18 course, a new 114,000 square foot driving range, and making improvements into the clubhouse. I was also involved in the Park Recreation Trail Strategic Plan, which I think is essential because it really provided that vision for the department, especially in looking at operations, maintenance, and programming to really guide into the future. Let's see, also involved in the city of Edina was proposing to build a new community center, a 70,000 square foot facility which would actually, we would replace the current art center and senior center, combine those into one facility, and then add a wellness component and some event space. So it was part of that feasibility study. The city never ended up building that facility, but it went through the process. In January of 2019, I took over as the interim Parks and Recreation Director. The director that was there took the director position with the city of Bloomington. So I was in that position for 5 months so when I took over, it was kind of a controversial time. There was one project that we were in the middle of that was extremely controversial with some of our resident neighborhood groups. It was a partnership project with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. And the Watershed District was looking at making improvements to the creek, and then the city was looking to improve and renovate. So we added a new $1 million park building a new playground, a new outdoor rink, and then some recreational walking trails. But the controversy was Arden Park it's a beautiful park that's really nestled into a neighborhood in a very wealthy area of Edina. And those residents didn't want to see change. So they fought and kicked to try to stop the project from happening. So when I jumped in as interim, what I was able to do is complete the final design of that building and get us to move forward in the project. So construction did begin in the spring of 2019. So that was a lot of fun. The other, I think, project that I completed is we completed a master plan of Fred Richards Park, which Fred Richards Park used to be, it was a golf course that the city made the decision to close. So we did a master plan, it's a 43-acre park, and this project was kind of our phase one. There wasn't funding to complete and implement the entire master plan, so the plan was to implement some in phases as monies became available. So I was able to complete that project. You know, it was a difficult decision for me leaving the city of Edina. I hired and trained and developed all of the general managers except for one. I also did the same for our recreation supervisors. So I was really proud of the team that was assembled and a really talented group. The draw to Bloomington. I wasn't interested in becoming the Parks and Recreation Director in Edina. I told the city manager right away. It wasn't something that I base a lot of my decisions just on those instincts, and it didn't feel right to me. I wasn't passionate about that community. So the director who was in Edina, who went to Bloomington, recruited me for the position that I'm in right now. So that may explain the transition. So in my current position, I am involved in all planning, all of the projects in the park system, and I have direct oversight over the enterprise facilities. So again, in Bloomington, there's a free sheet ice arena, the Bloomington Center for the Arts that has both visual arts programming and performing arts. There's a large theater, also a community center, and there are 2 golf courses. I started that position in August and have been fully immersed in community engagement process for a new proposed community center. So the city of Bloomington is looking at building a new community center for in the area. So the last 5 months we have been involved in, we've had open houses, we've done online surveys, we've done a lot of pop-up events. So we're going to people in the community at whether it's city-sponsored events or some of our partners in the community that had events, just trying to get information and get input on what people want. First of all, what they want to see in the community center, and secondly, where do they want it? That's the other difficult situation right now in Bloomington is there's a very strong kind of east and west Bloomington. It's like east is the old Bloomington, and then west is the newer, bigger homes, younger residents. So right now, the community can't decide where they want to put the building. So that's where we are at this particular point, is trying to find a location. Everyone wants a community center, they just don't know where they want to put it. So that has been my plate full-time here since I started. But we also just started a overall park system master plan in Bloomington. Again, to kind of take a comprehensive look at all of the parks. You know, Bloomington is it's a big city, and it's very spread out. There's over 3,000 acres of parkland, and there is 50-some playgrounds, 36, off-road trails. So the neat thing about Bloomington is there's the Minnesota Valley, the river that runs through it. So it really creates a lot of opportunities, again, for the mountain biking, for some more natural resource type projects. So that was the draw for me, really leaving my position in Edina for Bloomington was just new challenges, and which I enjoy. I like a good challenge. So that's kind of what I've been doing here the last 20-some years in my career. Yeah, and I think why I'm interested in this position is there's many reasons. You know, I think Fargo is a fantastic city, and every time I visit, the growth it's just amazing, right? From when I was here many years ago, when I lived here, to now, and that's exciting to me from a park perspective, because I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I think it's going to be really important that there's planning that goes into that and really managing that growth. I think because, you know, this is just an example, but you know, we can keep looking through a capital plan and just continue to replace aging infrastructure. But I think it's more important to take a look overall. And do we really want to be replacing this playground at this park? Maybe there's something different that we want to do with that particular piece of land. So that to me, and when I think of Fargo and all those opportunities, that's exciting. I have a strong connection to the community. You know, I have great friends that live here. I have family who's here. I'm passionate about being here. I've been looking for, you know, this isn't the next kind of step in my professional career. This is the step. This is where I want to be. I believe that I have experience that's well aligned with the park district, with the facilities, the size. I've also have that planning experience that I think would be valuable. And I'll tell you, I will work tirelessly. I'll work with staff, work with the board to continue to create recreational opportunities, you know, year-round that connect the residents in Fargo, because that's what parks do. Parks connect people. Parks connect neighborhoods, and that's why I love what I do.
All right, thank you very much.
Did you fill the 2 hours?
Okay, 34 more questions. No, that wasn't even a question. Shoot, 35.
So we have like 6 different categories of questions. One is on culture and fit. One is management style, staffing. Third one is leadership, strategic planning, board experience. Fourth is change leadership and problem solving. Fifth is budget and finance, and then some wrap-ups.
Okay.
So we'll start with culture and fit, and maybe I'll start over here with Vicki, and you can ask the first question, and we'll circle around this way.
So this question refers to your current goal, and you might need to refer back just based on time span, but what 3 aspects of your role give you the most satisfaction?
Number 1 would be working with staff and watching staff grow. You know, like I said, you know, I had the opportunity to hire in Edina all the general managers and the recreation supervisors, and to really see, you know, not even depending on an age, right, but just to watch how at one point maybe they would respond to an email, and then with a little bit of feedback and coaching, just the difference. So I'm a relationship builder, so that's number 1, what I enjoy. I like results. I'm old school. I like my to-dos. I like that feeling of accomplishment. So, which I think has been helpful for me, because I am able to start a project and see it through to completion. So that would be my second. And I think just overall, what I really enjoy doing, what I love about the job is building relationships with people. You know, working with staff, number 1, but working with community partners and working with community members, and potentially working with other organizations that ultimately, they want the same thing, to better, provide better experiences for, whether it's kids, for adults. So I think those three things. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Yep.
All right, can you give us, what's one professional mistake that you made that you wish you could go back and fix?
Oh, so this is like okay, make sure that you're checking the boxes. So we were working on a project, and I don't even remember what the project was. So a resident sent an email to the director and said, oh, you need to do this, or basically said something different than what the direction that we were heading. And I hope you can follow my story. So the director then forwarded that email on to me. And me, thinking that I was responding to the director, I responded to the resident. And my email said, her name was Winnie. Does Winnie think she's managing this project? And the minute I sent it, I like, okay. I usually double check, right? I always want to be sure that I'm sending it to the right person. And I went back in and I saw that it went directly to the resident. So I, of course, panicked. I ran to next door to the director and I said, this is what I did. So I immediately called IT and tried to see how we call the email, which you can't. Internal I could have, not external. So what I did is immediately I reached out to the resident. And I said, have you seen your emails? And she said no. And I said, well, you're going to see an email from me. This is what it says. I want to apologize. I shouldn't have sent the email. And she was gracious. It took a few months for her to warm back up to me. And she's someone that we work with pretty closely. So, but I think the fact that I admitted my mistake and kind of just handled it straight on, I think really helped to maintain that relationship, and her and I have been able to work together after that with no issue. But that was a bad mistake.
How long ago was that?
It was probably my first year that I was the assistant director. Yeah.
Lessons learned.
Yeah.
Still hurts your stomach, doesn't
It
it?
does. I mean, I can just, I still can feel the panic that I had when I realized that I sent it to her.
So I got the next question. It looks, going through your resume and your work history, 6-8 years, you moved on, 6-8 years, you moved on, but this, at Bloomington now, you've only been there less than a year. Is there something in the kind of the culture or the fit that got you antsy to start looking again, or
You mean for this position?
for this position, or?
It's because it's this position. I wasn't looking for any other positions. When I took the job in Bloomington, the plan was that I would succeed the current director. I mean, that was what the plan was when she hired me into the position. But I said, I accepted the position in Bloomington on July 1st. And on July 2nd or July 3rd is when I read in the Fargo Forum that this position may be open. So at that point, I knew that I was going to apply and at least give it a shot, because I would have had major regrets if I didn't. In 2016, when the job was first open, I had a long conversation. I called Roger Grass and just talked to him for quite a while, and he was very gracious in answering my questions. And at the time, I just didn't feel like it was right. I didn't necessarily know if I was prepared, if I was ready to take on such a large operation. And today, I do, and that's why I'm here. So as far as jumping around, I'm competitive, and I like to be challenged, but I really wouldn't have left Edina if it weren't for kind of this, this picture of, hey, be in here for a few years and then you can take over as the director.
So, I'm sorry, I'm gonna just piggyback on you just a tish. So had you read it in the forum on June 28th, would you have taken the job in Bloomington?
No. I don't think I would have made, you know what, let me, before I answer that, let me think. I'm not sure, because there was a lot of, I think even in the 5 months that I've been in Bloomington, I've learned something. You know, especially this community engagement process that I've just been a part of, it's going to help me further in my career. So that's a good question. I'm not sure. I probably wouldn't have done that to the director. I already feel bad right now applying for this position. Obviously, she's aware. So, yeah, I don't think it's
As a deputy, are you the second in command,
Yes.
or are there several at that same level?
I am second in command.
Okay.
Yep. There's a position. It's an assistant director of parks and projects, but I am second in command in the department. Yeah.
All right. Tell us about your proudest professional accomplishment. What was it and what were the results?
Can I share two?
Mm-hmm.
So the first one I think I already shared with you. It was hiring the staff in Edina. I take a lot of pride in that process because when I first started as assistant director, the enterprise facilities were siloed. They all kind of, the golf course just interacted with golf course. The ice arena, just ice arena. So what I did when I came in is broke down the silos and really created a cohesive team where if we needed, front desk help at one facility, we'd be calling another facility to see if there was staff. So there's that, and I think it starts with identifying and selecting the right people. Making sure that the right person is leading those facilities, and not that it was just me in that selection, but I did have the final say in those hires. And same with our recreation programming staff that we had. Bringing in people who I felt were going to be the best fit, and it really turned out to be really good, solid hires. So I'm proud of that. I think another accomplishment is there's some projects that I'm proud of that I led. There's a park renovation project, the Pamela Park project, that I'm really proud of. It was one of the first big projects that I led, where we added a new park building, about $750,000, a new artificial turf field, and kind of renovated some fields and added some walking trails. But I think the other thing that I'm proud of as an accomplishment is that I was recruited for the current position I'm in. I think that says something about me and the fact that in Bloomington, and I didn't mention this, but it's a newly created department. So previously in Bloomington, there was a recreation division and a recreation facilities division. And they reported up through a community services division. So that whole organization structure changed. So for the director to want me to bring in specifically to improve the bottom line and staffing at those enterprise facilities, I think I'm proud of that.
What are your professional strengths and what areas could use improvement?
I think my professional strengths are my ability to connect with people, leadership with staff. I think another one is my passion for what I do. I think that trickles down to staff, and I think that really is a good match with keeping employees engaged and committed. And think just my ability to build relationships. I mentioned with staff, but also with residents and with partners in the community. I think that I'm very genuine, and I care, and I'll take the time to meet with people, and I'll take the time to listen. And I think that has been effective in developing some relationships.
Okay.
And weakness,
Any improvements?
and improvements. There's a lot of them. I just don't want to share them all. That would be, let's see. I think one, and I'm continuing to work on this, is I do have very high expectations, but I have high expectations for myself. But then trickling down to staff. So I have high expectations for staff, and what I've learned throughout my professional career is that there are some people that they're just not going to care as much as what I do. They're not going to want to work as hard, and that's okay. Not everyone is going to be at this level. So that's something that I've had to work through throughout my career. And, probably 10 years ago when I was at the Y, I wasn't nearly as good of a manager as I am right now. So I have kind of worked on that part.
So how do you handle staff that you have this vision and you're thinking that they're not motivated, they're not pitching in nothing? How do you get them to where you are, or do you find that you're not able to do that in some cases?
Yeah, I think it depends on that person's position. I think if it's a director position, it will be to get them engaged. You work together with the team to kind of come up with that vision. But then it's showing staff how their role fits into that vision and how what they do really makes a difference. Mm-hmm. It's including them in decision making, so they feel like their voice is heard and it matters. It's listening to their ideas, and it's communication. I think is really important to keep staff motivated and engaged, is making sure that that there's communication across all divisions, not just in their particular area. I think that helps. But I think my expectations would be a little different for maybe a part-time type of an employee versus one that's a higher level. So.
Thank you.
I think Rusty kind of moved into management style and staffing with that question, so maybe we'll come back this way.
Yeah.
It was pretty close to
No,
You're going to confuse me changing directions.
Yeah.
You might have actually answered a question, so you might have gotten an extra one out of the way there.
Great.
Yep.
You want me to go?
Yep.
I'm off the hook.
Well, we'll just feed off of this. Executive directors mentor less experienced employees. What would you do to mentor junior employees and help them advance in their careers? What are your views on mentoring? And please provide examples of your mentors and how you've mentored others within your organization.
Okay. You might have to repeat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, what I think, how the way I interpret this is, you come from a hierarchy very similar to what we have.
Yep.
Executive director, deputy directors, and then fill in underneath. And so if you see, you'll connect, based on what you're saying, you connect well with people. And so you'll connect well with, I just say hi to the deputies out front because they both think, it's easier. But, they're not your direct report. So if you saw qualities in someone that isn't a direct, how would you mentor them, and what would you put in place for them?
I think for in that situation, again, it goes back to kind of seeking out that person, whether it's in a formal meeting or even if there's some time in passing, to really ask, the questions. What are your aspirational, goals? Where do you want to be? And then I think it is, if there's the opportunity, is to get those people involved in, whether it's some of the planning meetings Maybe it's some projects, even if it's just sitting in on meetings to learn, how the process works. I think are some of the things that I would do, and then certainly work with that person's direct supervisor, and to have those conversations about, what are you doing to help, we'll use Becky in this situation, to advance professionally, and maybe, provide some suggestions and work directly there too.
What if the director doesn't see the same potential you do? How would you handle that?
Well, I think I continue to have conversations with the director to find out why they don't see that, and I would share maybe the reasons why I think this person does.
Fair enough.
Okay.
I have the next question. How do you deal with conflict in the workplace? Maybe identify a situation that you dealt with and how you rectify the situation. And I'm thinking, you've got someone in a leadership position and then someone that's beneath that person, and they're having conflict, or maybe you have two equals that have had different ideas about how to go forward. And
Well, that never happens.
Take those glasses up, and get those rose-colored glasses.
So how I deal with conflict is I am very direct in my approach. I mean, when I say that, I mean, if I see that there is a conflict, I'm not going to avoid it. I'm not going to just, turn my head. I'm going to have conversations, because I think the longer you avoid it, the worse the situation becomes. Now, have I had a situation where there's been conflict? Yeah. So when I was in Edina, there was major conflict at our art center. Conflict between the general manager and the assistant manager. The two of them, first of all, were polar opposites, which why we thought would be a good match, right? Different skill sets, but that wasn't wrong, at least in this situation. And the assistant manager would come in on a regular basis just in tears, because of something didn't go well, which was very difficult to deal with that particular situation. But what I did was I worked with both of them together. So I set up scheduled meetings where the three of us would sit down and we would meet. There would be an agenda. These are the items, these are the areas where the two weren't seeing eye to eye, and we would try to talk through it. And then also what I asked of them is for the two of them to also meet and kind of talk through those things to see how can we change our styles a little bit so they were able to work together. So that's one situation where I jumped in, got involved and worked there. In the end, the outcome, the assistant manager did resign, so that took care of the situation, which was actually an okay decision.
Sure.
We were okay with that.
Thank you.
Okay, can you describe your hiring philosophy? Do you promote from within or hire externally? Why?
I hire the best candidate. As far as if there have been times when positions have been open where I didn't go external and only posted a position internally, and that was because I felt like there's a very qualified candidate for that position internally. There was other times where we just immediately posted a position externally because we didn't feel like, not that there necessarily wasn't an internal candidate, but we felt like we could probably get a better candidate from outside. So as far as my hiring, did I answer that question? Okay. But ultimately, my goal would be to hire the best qualified, the best candidate, qualified, but also the candidate that fits in best with the culture of the team, because I think that is critically important.
So we just approved a policy that with our positions, we post them internally and externally. And part of that, so if you have a position and if you choose to post it externally, but other positions you just hire internally, has any of your staff ever thought, well, maybe we're not the best qualified for that, and that's why you're posting externally? I think that's part of what we talked about, and just having that consistency.
Yeah, that is the message. And in those situations where we made the decision to post externally, there was a conversation with the internal candidate to say, look, we know you may be interested in this position, but we feel, again, this is an important hire, that we want to post it externally. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, this would be a situation where we did not feel like we really had a qualified internal candidate. I mean, that would be for this. I think it's I can just jump in. I think it's inefficient to only post a position internally and then find out that that's not the right person and then take another few weeks to post it externally.
Might be a paper and pen for my list here. Rate the importance of the following groups and explain why. Staff, community, taxpayer, user groups, and the board.
Depends on whom I'm in the room with. Okay. Staff, board, user groups, taxpayers, residents?
Yeah.
Taxpayers, residents, same.
Same thing, yeah. Okay.
No,
No?
kind of.
They're all
Close enough.
directly.
So
Pays the tax.
obviously, all of those groups are very important, and relationships with all of those groups are very important. Can I pass on this
You
question?
don't have to necessarily 1 through 4. You can,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to explain your position
Sure.
on, then that's fine too.
So this is my, like, as the executive director, my most important relationship. I think my most important relationship is going to be with staff and with the board. Staff, because staff carry out the work in the community, and having that leadership and providing direction, staff deliver the services to the community members. Now, obviously, we wouldn't be where we are if we didn't have a community and taxpayers. We rely on funding, right, and that tax support. So that is very important as well. That's a great question. Everyone is important for different reasons in different areas.
That's why your community elects a board, right?
That's why the community elects a board to speak on their behalf, to represent the community.
Well, so you mentioned staff and board, and then you talked a little bit about staff, and you talked about the board a little bit.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, this position reports directly to the board. So I think having a good relationship with all of you is critical to the success of this position. And, establishing kind of the expectations from you of what you want to see and what you need from this position, and have that understanding, I think is important, is very important. Setting those expectations, and from the executive director perspective is providing you with accurate, detailed information, so you have that. So when community members reach out to you with questions or complaints or concerns, you can respond. So it's a great partnership.
Are your board members appointed or elected?
So in Edina and in Bloomington, the commissions were appointed. City council is elected.
And in Minnesota, is the park district part of the city budget?
Yeah, so it's set up a little bit different. So it's municipality. So the Parks and Recreation departments fall in with the city. There isn't a separate park district.
Okay.
So let's move on to number 3, leadership, strategic planning, and board experience. Kind of got into that a little bit. Start off, Vicki, and go back around this way. Yeah, we'll just do one question each.
So, as the executive director, you'll be at a community event, or obviously be at many different events. It might not even be a community event, but there might be many people. What's your thought on how do you work the room? Are you working the room? Who do you pay attention to and not spend time on? What would that look like?
Well, I think I have a pretty friendly demeanor. I enjoy interacting with people, so I enjoy having conversations with people. So if I were at an event, I would be proactive in walking up to people, introducing myself to whomever is in attendance at the event. Did I? Is there more you're? I mean, I think
we might get to this, but
so maybe so if it's an event where there is a key stakeholder, right, or there is a potential partner that we want to get on board, I would absolutely spend quite a bit of time trying to really cultivate that relationship.
and does that person or group get more attention than a different person or group? All the time, or at that particular time, or? Do I keep painting you in the corner?
Okay, well, that's a tough question. So, I mean, I think it's going to be important. Let me say this. I treat people in my interactions the same. I am going to be the same Susan Faus with John Smith as I'm going to be with, trying to think of the mayor in Fargo. To me, it's not about necessarily titles. It is just about being respectful and, professional, having just positive, good relationships.
That's what I was looking.
Okay, thank you.
All right, give us an example of a strategic vision that you personally authored. I know you said you've been on several projects that you ended up being in charge of or something, but something that was your vision and you brought it to fruition. How did you go about executing the vision, and what was the outcome of the process?
So I think I may have touched on it in my introduction, but the example with Edinburgh Park, that was one that I came in and saw some of the inefficiencies and took it on to do this operational study to not only identify that, but then to put a plan in place. Yeah. I mean, so, looking at, we did the lighting retrofit project. We removed a lot of those large trees so we could do that lighting retrofit. Those large trees need the lights. I'm sorry, I feel like I've talked to so many.
No, you're saying you just wonder you cut the deficit from 300,000 down to 25 to 50,000?
Yep. And that wasn't something that, the director said, hey, can you take this on? I saw a need. I saw really some excessive and some inefficiencies. So I took it upon myself to say, hey, we can do better. And this is what we can do.
Thank you.
So I got the next one. So alignment between the board, the executive director, and I'll just say community and staff is important. And if the alignment gets out of place, things can get wacky real fast. And examples would be like if the commissioner is out negotiating with a user group saying, oh yeah, we can do this, we'll deliver, blah, blah, blah. And then they come back and spring it on you. Or we're out talking to staff saying, you should be doing this, not that, and that becomes an alignment problem. Have you dealt with any of those kind of alignment issues, or how would you handle situations where that alignment gets off?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to the importance of initially setting those expectations with the board and having the conversations. You know, if your expectation is that you want to be free to talk to staff, talk to community members about it, I mean, you're going to talk to community members, but to talk to staff about particular issues or like requests, I think just so I'm aware of it would be what's important. You know, so it's kind of just establishing some of those guidelines on really what do we want this relationship to look like. I think that happens. I think it probably happens a lot where, you know, people are reaching out to all of you kind of about their issue, right, what they want, and probably puts you in some difficult situations at times. So, you know, I would see us having that conversation about, okay, so-and-so brought this to me, how do you think we should respond, you know, from what's really going on in the district? Does that kind of...
Yeah, because I've experienced it myself, but it's not intentional.
Sure.
But, you know, you get a constituent, even today I got a constituent email saying, can you donate to this cancer fundraiser we're doing? And the early board member who just got elected would probably, sure, we'll figure something out. And then, but, you know, instead I got a hold of our existing, our interim executive director and said, how do you want to handle this? So we communicated that back. So, but I've seen situations where we didn't operate like that, and it's messy.
I mean, I think ideally, you know, it probably works the best if the board doesn't necessarily, I know. I was going to say, so I think it just goes back to setting the expectations and the communication. I think so there is that understanding. And same, you know, I would never want as the executive director to speak on behalf of one of you, right? That's would be inappropriate and out of line for me to do. Not that I'm saying that the board would be inappropriate to speak out of line. I just mean that we have to establish what that looks like.
We have to be on
There'll
the
be some
same
conversations. We have to be on the same team. We have to communicate.
So how do you vet that out? And you might have a resident that's passionate about something, or a commissioner that's passionate about something, maybe just one of the five, and maybe you have a feeling maybe it is just one of the five, and maybe not the majority. So knowing that, you know, you start putting it out an email, and it's all of a sudden a public record, but how would you handle something like that? If I would come to you with your executive director and say, we need 2 new 18-hole golf courses, whatever, just you're thinking, well, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I think in that situation, it would be, you know, if I didn't already know the answer, I mean, it would be me as in this position talking to staff about the feasibility of, you know, do we have any data to justify needing another golf course, and then presenting that information to you and say, okay, you know, maybe we've done a survey or we've done a needs assessment and it shows that there isn't the support for more golf in Fargo. And then it would be a conversation that I would have with you that said, you know, Rusty, this is the data that we have. This is the input that we've already received from the residents.
I think you should cut right to the Rusty, you're crazy. Just kidding. Your answer was
we don't
way better.
need more.
Your answer was way better than mine.
I like the more professional approach.
I think you're
Vet
right.
it out
I think you're
first.
right.
As long as it's Rusty and you and me.
That's right.
We have
It's
good
my
ideas.
idea.
Yeah, exactly.
So
All
it would be
right.
a golf idea, though.
As the new executive director, how do you plan to shape this organization's image? You talked about your public relations experience already with difficult situations, and you're familiar with Fargo already, and determining we are a growing community. We grow in many ways, not just size, but different cultural aspects coming into our community. How do you see your position polishing the image or moving the image, you know, to the next stage in the Park District?
Well, I think in this in this position, you know, I think I would be a key spokesperson for the district. So I think I would probably be the one who would, if we're talking about a new project or whatever that goes on in the district, a lot of those times it would be me who would be addressing media, who would be taking the interviews and talking about the district. Now, if the question is kind of that we want to change the reputation of the park district, I don't know if that's because of the changing demographics.
Well, or do you see that as an issue? I mean, in your research of our district and watching our community grow, do you see that we, you know, we're not keeping up, or what do you think?
So what I have learned from the research, so I reached out to a lot of people who live in the community. I have a lot of friends and family who are in this community, and I'll be honest, there was a lot of favorable. Everyone talked about the great programs and the great events that the district offers. I did receive some, you know, feedback on some of the aging facilities, but all of the information that I heard was positive. The one piece, and I don't know how much community engagement goes on when there are new amenities added in parks, but I believe that's very important, and that is connecting with the community. And I think it helps for a lot of different reasons. You know, one is just getting to know community members, and it is showing the community that you care, that we're listening to what they want, which I think is important, and it helps getting support for when we do want to have bigger projects. I mean, I think one of my key responsibilities would be is to really find column boosters, you know, column fans, but find people in the community that are already super supportive that we can work with to help convince others of the same. So I think there are opportunities. I think there's an opportunity. I know the website is being updated. I think there's an opportunity to maybe do a little bit more, having a project site where we can have online engagement. That was one thing that I didn't see that I think would be really helpful moving forward, and that again is just building that trust and transparency with the community.
I don't know how much media exposure you've had, and if you have, you can answer this. If not, how would you? But how have you handled criticisms or questions from the media in the past?
So I probably haven't had a whole lot of direct, like, media interaction, probably since my college playing days. And then I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the star on the team, so I wasn't the one that they picked all the time. But I'm comfortable. I mean, I'm very comfortable speaking in large groups. Although I did almost do a double take this morning as I'm sitting in my hotel room drinking coffee when I saw my face on the screen, which was a bit of a surprise. But it would be something that would be, even though I haven't had a lot of it recently, it would be something that wouldn't be a concern or would be an issue for me. I mean,
Was there a photo from back in the playing days?
Well,
Or?
no,
Were there bars or were you wearing orange?
That's what I said. At least it wasn't like with the police underneath.
So before we move on, just because it's a perfect time to clarify something, because you said you haven't had a lot of experience with talking in front. So you saying you didn't do that much when you were deputy director, but so I just want to make sure I understand. So you were the assistant director with Edina.
Yep.
Your then director left for Bloomington. So you assumed the interim director position. You didn't say that you wanted to be a candidate for that position while I was there. They went through the whole search process.
Yep.
And he courted you away during that process, or did you go back to assistant director after that hire? Or?
Yeah, so I informed the city manager right away. Before they made a decision, I said I wasn't going to be applying for the position. So yeah, after the end, then I was recruited over to the Bloomington position. So I did go back to the assistant director position for
This is your boss right now.
approximately,
Oh, sorry.
yeah,
That's
approximately.
the key for some reason.
So the director in Edina started in end of June, and I left August 5th.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And I listed him as a reference.
Yeah,
in the
no, yeah,
director,
and
he's
I wasn't,
fantastic.
I was just trying to get this all to make sense
So that's
to me.
Gary.
Time,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
got it.
And so you would have worked with Ann when she was in Edina and Perry
Correct,
in
yep,
Edina,
yep,
and you didn't compete for the job in Edina.
correct, yeah.
Got it.
Okay, next category is change leadership or problem solving. One of the things you talked a little bit about in your intro was change. And that's one thing I always think about too is, we always look at our capitals and you always, they just say, well, how can we just fund this capital? What can we do? But I just think with millennials and just how things change so fast, you're coming from another district, what you've seen today, what you've researched, are there, any changes in facilities or programming that you would see instantly that you may implement?
So, first of all, I am not someone who will make major changes quickly. I believe in making any major change is taking the time to talk with staff, talk to the board, and really evaluate and assess before making any significant changes. Now, so as far as what I've learned, I think the main one is website. I think website can be updated, and I learned today that there is a plan to update the website. And I think that piece on the online engagement, I think adding an interactive park map on the website would be a real bonus as opposed to what's currently there. So, as far as operational changes, again, I don't think I have enough information to say that I would make any major changes at this point.
Okay.
All right, well, you've been to Fargo. Have you had any experience with natural disasters? Please describe your reactions, actions, and communication plan.
We try to avoid them. We try to avoid natural disasters.
I think without
Can you tell us how to do
pigeonholing
that?
you into one, we want to know about flooding.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you do that? Do you have a way to do that? Because,
If you could avoid it.
wow.
So no. I don't have any experience working in communities where, we have park assets that are very near a river that floods on a regular basis. But I know that Fargo has implemented some changes recently, and I know there's an ongoing conversation with the diversion, and that is an active conversation. So I know it's an issue, and I think it sounds like there's a lot of attention that's being given to that because of it being an issue.
An imminent threat.
And this spring, I think, it, again, could present some challenges.
So a lot of our park property is not protected by the proposed diversion.
Okay.
And so they've been pretty creative on nature paths and trails and things like that. Do you have any experience in developing land that was once a golf course and is now a pond? Or, parts have been taken up? I know you talked about the golf course that you redeveloped and...
Centennial Lakes. So Centennial Lakes is essentially stormwater. Any project, when we built the seasonal sports dome at Braemar, there's a 100-year flood system underneath the dome that will account for any potential issues with environmental changes. So yeah, I mean, it's something I think with every project is something that you have to be prepared for. Yeah.
So you mentioned in your research that we have some aging facilities, and we've got a couple of major parks that we are talking about in terms of planning and refresh and all that. Take us through your process and how you would lead that, planning, funding, community involvement, just kind of the whole master planning.
So I think there's been conversations about Lindenwood, and you mentioned the Island Park pool area. So as far as master planning, I think First is finding a good partner to work with, a consultant to work with on those projects. But it again goes back to having the vision of ultimately what we'd like to see. You know, what residents want to see, staff, what the board wants to see. And set up input gathering sessions with community members to generate ideas, brainstorming surveys. I think all will be critical to make sure that we're hearing from the entire community on the ideas that they'd like to see. I mean, both of our, Lindenwood is a huge park, right? It's a huge amenity to the city. So getting that input, and again, thinking outside the box and being creative with the design and the potential. I think sometimes it's hard for people to, when there's a park, it's just hard for people to see it look anything different than what it is. So if you can try to just open that up and start throwing some ideas around, I think it generally helps to get people thinking differently. And that's kind of what that reimagining sessions, if you will, would be important. So does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So, what would your top 3 priorities be during your first month, during your first 6 months, or your first year? In those 3 orders.
I think the first priority would be to start building relationships with the team. I know that there has been change, and there's kind of been that state of we don't know, right? We don't know if we have our leader and if there's going to be a different leader. So just that uncertainty. So I think spending time with staff to work on building those relationships and building trust is going to be important. And I think equally building those relationships with all of you will be a priority for me if given the opportunity. I think spending time learning the operations, learning the overall park system, the facilities, the amenities that we have, probably going through some form of a SWOT where we're working with the team on establishing what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, will be what I would focus on right away. The operations, and then start really working on community partners. Looking at, who do we not have a relationship with that we want to have a really better relationship with, and then reinvesting in those current partnerships. I know that the school district has been a great partner, the city, so making sure that we continue with that, because I think very important to the park district.
Thanks, because that was the one I wanted to ask, but
Perfect.
now I can ask something else. What do you envision as the typical day in the life of the executive director of Fargo Parks?
So there is no typical day, and I do know that. I realize, again, because of the size, there's a lot of moving parts, and you can plan what your day is going to look like, and you can walk into the office and it can be completely something else. There can be a situation at one of the facilities, an issue with a resident. So I think you have to be able to be flexible and to be able to kind of multitask and change gears like that in this position. I guess if I could plan a typical day, it would be coming in. It would be, I think my routine is always the day before, right? I'm planning for my next day. I'm planning for 2 weeks out. I'm a planner. I don't like to be caught off guard, so which I know you can't always control. But I like to look out, so I'm always preparing and kind of planning for that. So
To go along with that, if you got your typical day,
yeah.
do you see yourself being at your desk? Do you see yourself meeting with people within all the time, community all the time, driving around all day? Would you be in the parks?
Yeah, I think it would depend on what is going on. If there's anything urgent, as far as, you know, getting a packet together for a meeting. So I think you'd have to prioritize anything with a deadline. But if I didn't have to take that into consideration, no, I wouldn't be in my office. I would be visiting staff at the facilities, you know, stopping in. You know, it's not just going to be the importance of the relationship that I have with directors, it's the rest of the team, and making sure that they're seeing me and knowing that I'm supportive of the work that they do. It will be probably having coffee, having lunch with partners in the community, again, to try to enhance and cultivate those relationships. We can work, I mean, with technology, right? I mean, you can be reached anywhere. So you can respond to emails and phones from anywhere. Great about
Sometimes that's
technology.
not a good, no privacy.
Yeah.
Do you go on the budget finance?
Yeah.
Budget finance.
It's, you can skip me because I'm not ready yet, because my brain's still wrapping around the other stuff. I can't imagine where you're at, that's the whole deal.
Okay, so in budgeting financing, can you describe your understanding of how the Fargo Park District operations are funded, and how does your experience correlate to this type of funding?
So it's funded through the mill levy, which is, you know, based on assessed property values in the community. It's, I think, very similar to what I'm used to when working with a municipality. Probably the same process to go about, you know, looking at what's it going to cost to operate the park district, and then figuring out what that levy has to be set at to make sure that you know, there's that balance, right? There's the balance between making sure that we have enough to deliver the services that we need to the community, but that we're being responsible to the Fargo community, because obviously this is an impact to them and their property tax values and what they're paying.
I'll just tack on to that. We've added a number of new parks over the recent years, and how do you look at expansion and growth at the expense of operational maintenance of existing facilities? And again, kind of goes back to some aging facilities,
Yeah.
but you know, we're trying to take on new things, but we have to take care of the things at home too.
So that's where I would go back to the importance of having that park system strategic plan in place, because that's what the plan will address, right? It will look at your existing facilities. It will provide a prioritization strategy and an implementation phase, giving guidelines how to make decisions. Because again, having that, and that's community involvement. So when having to make the decisions, it makes those decisions a lot easier. Because as the board, you can refer back to this plan, and this is what we heard from the community. So I think that is really helpful in doing that. I think right now, a lot is based on kind of the 10-year capital. And that's great that is in place, because that shows the infrastructure, right, and what needs to be placed, but it doesn't take into account some of the new potentials that are out there.
Thank you.
Okay, we're in the development stage of building a multi-use sports complex. Way on the south end of town, which where I live now used to be way on the south end of town, not in the middle, just for reference. What's your experience in developing and fundraising for any large project like this? If not, what are your thoughts about your role in accomplishing the necessary tasks to bring this complex to fruition?
Yeah. So I would see my role as is getting out into the community and trying to again make those connections with people who potentially would be able to contribute to the project. As far as my experience, for municipal government, there isn't an expectation of staff doing any fundraising. So while I've been employed with the City of Bloomington and Edina, I haven't needed to fundraise for any project. Now, when I worked for the Y, I did lead fundraising campaigns, but not the 60 million, $40 million range. But to me, it's a process. You know, fundraising goes back to developing a relationship, putting a plan together on who are you gonna ask? You know, who are the people in the community that we want to partner with on this project? Who do we need to ask? Who has the best relationship with that person? And figuring out, okay, what's the potential? The one thing I learned at the Y is you don't want to be calling people and asking them for $10, and you could have potentially received $500. So you got to do your research to find out what is that potential. So that is the experience. I haven't really done it for a large scale project, but I think I can contribute.
Just to follow up to that, we also, in the past few years, have created a foundation that is kind of it's still in the growing stages, and they have taken on that task for the Park District employees. However, the executive director sits on this committee and contributes to that. How do you see yourself? How do you feel about that? Have you worked with foundations, and what do you think about that for a public entity?
Yeah, I'm super supportive of having a foundation that will help to get the word out and tell the story in the community. I think that's really helpful and would be helpful to the Park District. As far as experience, in Edina, we did work. There was an Edina Community Foundation that worked very closely with the city. And that was the exact partnership where they accepted donations on behalf of the city to fund some of the projects that maybe weren't a priority or couldn't be funded through the city.
Okay, thank you.
So this is going to be a lot of information. I don't expect you to know. I don't know if you've looked at our budget at all, but we talked about our funding mechanism, and some of it comes from the mill. So roughly our budget's $31 million. About 25% comes from state, local, federal funding. The balance of it then comes from user fees, program fees. So it's roughly an 80-20 split right now. I don't know in your past positions if there's been a split like that, or if it's all just been city funded. Or then my other question is do you have any ideas how to potentially alleviate some of the dependency on the public funding and gear it more, whether it's on the income side or the expense side?
Yeah, so in Edina and in Bloomington. So the enterprise facilities, and I'm going to speak for this particular example with the city of Edina. So there was an expectation in Edina that the enterprise facilities were our business. They were their own business, so they were run like a business. So I set up, worked with the finance team to set up cost recovery targets for those facilities. And I think this kind of answers your question is, I think continually we have to evaluate the facilities to see what are some potential additional revenue sources, and are there more efficient ways that we can reduce some of the expenditures while still delivering the great service to the residents in Fargo. And we did that in Edina and set these targets and these goals. And I think that was really helpful. It was helpful to make it clear, right? Clear to, in this case, the city council that this is what, like for example, the golf course. The golf course is going to recover 98% of its costs. So when budgeting and planning, you know what to expect and you know what that subsidy will be.
Was that the goal for golf courses?
The golf course was 100%. But part of that was, I did look through, so I did look through the budget. So I have, but I have an understanding. But that was after we made significant improvements. I think I mentioned we did a complete renovation of the entire operation. And in that is the golf dome. And the golf dome revenue is great. We bring a lot of revenue at the golf dome.
So you're saying you lose money on the course, but it washes up with the revenue you're generating from the dome?
Yeah. And this was the first year that the course opened. So the course opened in the spring of 2019. So I'm not even sure where it ended up at the end of the year, but that was the expectation. And also that it would fund its capital projects.
They have any problems with the greens? Because there are a lot of greens in the Twin Cities that died over the winter from the
Yeah.
snow, the ice, the freeze melt
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, no, and that was a major concern because it was a brand new course.
Mhm.
Yep, but we didn't have any issues at Fargo.
Not that has anything to do with this, but I was just curious.
And that's what I always am. So when this comes up,
Yeah.
and I'm a private businessman,
Yeah.
so I mean, people are thinking that I want to find a way to make money.
Yeah,
I want to find a way to save
Yeah.
more money so we can use that elsewhere
yep,
and not depend as much on public funding for certain
Yeah.
things, and you can, use that for improvements or other things in the district.
yeah. I think there are some facilities that are, there's a better chance of reaching a higher cost recovery. Ice arenas are just expensive. They're expensive to operate. So, I mean, that's why public entities generally operate ice arenas. So I think you want to, take a look at that in setting these cost recovery targets. But again, I think it also helps just to keep the focus. The other thing that we did was set cost recovery targets with our programs, which was also helpful. I know here there's a lot of programs, a lot of events, and I think overall there's a loss of, I want to say $800 and some $1,000 a year, but the community values the programs. But what we did in Edina was we did a recreational analysis. So we did an assessment of all of our programs and determined what our core program areas were, and like where were the gaps. And then we did a life cycle evaluation. So with a program, was it at an introductory, right? Was it a new program, a lot of excitement, a lot of support, or was it on a decline? Something that we need to evaluate, maybe stop adding, stop offering it. And then we classified programs based on, was it an essential program to the community? Was it important, or was it a value add? Essential programs, mission programs. It was something that the community really wanted. The expectation there was not they would recover 100% of costs. Programs that were important, it was going to be close. And then value add, there would be an expectation that you would make money. And then created these mini business plans, which I think was pretty successful. So
Can I just follow up with your ice arena, and we're almost on the last category. So people think ice arenas, and the reason they're expensive is you have ice in from November through February, so it's 4 months out of the
Yeah.
year. Do you guys multi-purpose your facilities at all? Do you do anything, if you pull
Yeah.
ice out, do you do anything else in the fall, in the spring? Summers are probably tougher.
yeah, no, in Edina and Bloomington, we don't pull the ice out. So there is a year-round demand for ice. So both facilities run year-round. There are a ton of tournaments. I mean, in the summer months, especially at Braemar, I mean, it's just as busy in the summer months as it is in December and January. So we haven't had to look for alternate, yeah.
It's crazy hockey players.
Now you know why the North Dakota teams can't beat the Minnesota teams.
Cheating.
They never
Playing
beat
too
the
hard.
Minnesota.
When you have a building where you have a cake eater tournament, right?
Have you been to Braemar? Yeah.
That's what it's called, the cake eater
Yeah,
tournament.
I mean,
It's
they
embarrassing, yeah.
They ran out of names,
They
there were
don't,
so many
well,
tournaments.
they don't bother to hide what people call them. They just, fine, we'll embrace it.
Every day I need attention. Dinah.
That's right. I
back to
don't, no,
budget.
I don't need any more information on budget. I think we kind of covered things, so I don't have an additional question there. So we're just kind of on the back end here of what we've got coming down the home stretch. So you've been here, let's say we hire you, you've been here 6 months. How's it going? What's it going to look like? How are we going to know that, boy, we hit it out of the park, we got a good one?
Well, I hope that we're communicating in that first 6 months. And that's what I would want, is I would want open dialogue with you. Again, it kind of goes back to, I think I would want to early on understand what are your priorities, from the board, and where do you want me to start on first? So I would hope that we would establish that and meet often and talk frequently. So I think then, hopefully I am leading the staff the way that you have envisioned and getting out and working with the community. And I think in 6 months, you should be able to see that. It's going to be a learning curve. I mean, it will, right? Coming into any time when you're coming into a new department, a new city, really. I mean, I used to live here, but it's been a long time. There is going to be a learning curve for me. And I would hope that as a board that you would understand that piece. But again, I tell you, I'll work tirelessly because I'm passionate about what we do, and I love to do Fargo, working with all of you.
Okay, the executive director position is in the pay grade number 22. So the salary range is between $114,000 and $152,000. HR can provide you details and all the fringe benefits of the package, but do you have any specific salary requirements?
Well, I can tell you what I make right now. My current salary is $141,075. So, I mean, I would, I guess, hope that it would be, equivalent to that.
Sure. Thank you.
So, if you're selected for the position, when would you be able to start? What kind of timelines have you thought about, how long you would need?
Yeah, I would want to get started as soon as possible. I certainly, at minimum, would want to give a 2 to 3 week notice, I think, for my current employer, but then could get started as soon afterwards. I would need to figure out some temporary stay. I would got some property need to sell some property, and so.
Well, now there are property. Fargo is a unique community with West Fargo and Fargo intertwining to the point of confusion during elections even, and Moorhead's right across the river. Fargo Park District policy requires the executive director to live in Fargo within 6 months of taking the job. Will you be able to comply with this policy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, as far as purchasing another home would be dependent on selling one in Minneapolis. But yeah, that would absolutely be my intent.
And lastly, why should you be our next executive director?
Well, I think that I have, the experience that I have is well-rounded. I do believe that it's very comparable to what the Fargo Park District has as far as facilities and sports complexes. The other couple pieces that I haven't, I talked about the kind of the community engagement on projects, but in Bloomington, I also oversee an outreach, community outreach and engagement staff person with a real focus on reaching more of the diverse and underserved areas. So I think that would add value here. There may not be as much diversity in Fargo, but I do think those demographics are changing. And I think it's going to be really important that we're able to connect with all of the community in moving forward. So I think I bring, I have the experience in sales and advertising and marketing that are sometimes a little bit unique, I think, to a park and recreation professional. But I have, I have proven success leading teams. And I've led teams through a culture of change. I think about changing in Edina and currently in the city of Bloomington, so I have that experience. I also have a lot of the project experience and the park planning experience that I think will be important for this position. And I'm going to go back to just the leadership piece. I believe that I connect, at least I like to think that I connect well with people. and that I am a good leader and manager for the staff. And I am team focused. I have building that culture where staff will have that continuous learning, innovative thinking, which I think is very important to advance. I have a passion. Hopefully you've seen that. I love what we do. I love the impact that we make on a community in parks. And I want to be here. I want to live in the community, and I would be honored to be the next leader for the department and work closely with you.
Well, great. We don't have any more questions.
Okay.
We've exhausted it. Do you have any questions for us? We got another 4 hours.
Yeah.
Questions, so.
Jerry,
So I do have a few questions. I think my first one, so what are your priorities for kind of the current state of the park district?
I'll start with the operations or the
Okay.
admin in general. You know, you've done your research.
Yeah.
You know, we had a long-term
Yep.
executive director. Prior to Grassley, Bob Johnson had been here for equally as long or longer, and so they were used to this tradition and stability. And people retire, that's just life. And so we had an interim or a director come in with different ideas and good, bad, or indifferent. Change is hard.
Yep.
And so the staff is, you clearly can see it. They're curious and they're on edge. And, I think that for me, a priority would be to get everybody to feel like this is the way it's supposed to be. Maybe it's not the same as it was, but this is what it's supposed to be, and we're all in it together for the greater good of the park system in Fargo. And so that, I can't speak for the entire commission, but that's really important for me, is that I think the staff, you said it earlier, the staff takes care of things.
Mm-hmm.
We may call and say, we want another golf course because we can't get on at this time, and they have to push it through and figure out, and even if it's some crazy idea, they have to be able to communicate back to us. No, we can't, we understand, blah, blah, blah. But, I think that they need to see that they're on a ship again and that has no holes in it.
The
And I'll just
team
piggyback
piece
on
of
that.
the staff, I would say is a big, building that comfort, not necessarily comfort of sitting back, but
Because they continue
feeling
to,
good about what they're doing every
right,
day.
and they get it done, and they feel good about it, and they know it's right, but they don't, I think there's an uneasiness of where are we going?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. Well, the fear of the unknown,
Mhm.
right, makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Piggyback on that, I mean, that's important. The other part of me is balance. And we talked about capitals and things that we've had on our plans. And there are things that have been on there for a long time. And we just lately have seemed to just kind of keep kicking the can down the road. And it's not going to get any cheaper. And all of a sudden, they're all just going to lump up. So, I mean, addressing staff and then addressing our needs too, and just having that balance moving forward.
Yeah, and you hit on it in one of your answers. We want to make the best possible hire. We've got, as we look at the candidate pool, we've got 1 internal and 4 externals, and there's nobody that's got, we're not playing any, we're going through the process here kind of thing. We definitely want to hire the best hire we can get.
Anyone else? I guess just curious, I talked probably a lot about community engagement. So I guess what is your expectation for engaging the community on projects and all that with the district? Is that something that's important to you? Is it?
I love it. A lot of people ask me a lot of questions, and my family has run into pretty much every possible park thing we could possibly experience. And so I'll have people to text and say, hey Vicki, what's up with this, or hey, we need this, or hey, we need that. And I love that feedback. I want to know if there's if a light bulb's out. I want to know if somebody's unhappy. I want to know if they're happy. I think it's important that we are engaging, because otherwise we're sitting in here and we don't know what they necessarily think. From my aspect, one of my questions with, and I actually wrote it down, so now I'm asking you another question, but it's how do we find out what that quiet partner wants?
Yeah.
So we talked about we've talked about, when we were talking about Lindenwood, we talked about, okay, we're going to have these community meetings, but who comes to a community meeting? The loud, crappy neighbor, and not the group that says, this is what we want, who's very thoughtful about it. And so how do we, that's the piece that I was kind of curious with you, is how do you get to those people?
So what we have done in the past is a lot of online engagement, going back to having an option for people to provide feedback while they're at home. A lot of times, you're exactly right. People who attend your town halls or your open houses are, people who are generally opposed to the project, or an older, a resident maybe who doesn't have as many time commitments as working families with kids and activities. So you're only hearing one viewpoint. So I think having the information online, so it can be convenient and easy for people, but it's going out into the community. It's showing up at a farmer's market, or showing up at an event and just talking and getting information in an organized way. But I think that's how you reach those people. And try to be somewhat targeted in, if it's on the north side, or like geographic, people who would actually use that amenity. But that's what I think has been done and has been somewhat successful. Because you're right, that's the voice you don't hear. It's the quiet one. It's people who generally are relatively happy, right, with the direction.
And I have the more cynical view of that too, and I love engagement, but the things that we talk about, I'm just wondering, are you really going to get the valuable information you want? Or are you going to get it from 10 people that go to all meetings? We did something about 4 years ago where we had community groups get together and tell us what they need. And I just remember there was a couple of them where we need a 30-seat hot tub, stuff like that. I just felt, I don't know how to do it, and that's why I'd like to know how would you gather the information that's useful and not just people complaining or just looking out for themselves.
You can provide options. You can come up with a list of, these are some of the ideas that we're thinking, which helps that, but when you do engagement, you kind of open up the can, right? And it's not always easy, and it can turn into kind of even some contentious interactions, but at least the community can't then say that you are not asking me what I want to hear. And I guess I just believe that it's, in the end, it shows that relationship, it shows transparency to the community that, we do. We're listening, we're trying to hear what you have to say. But I know it's not,
I think to strike a balance between the two different sides of that whole thing, the community elects a board for a reason, and you can run around chasing this information and taking up lots of your time. I would say, more of the polarizing subject matters would be the ones that you need to have this full-on public meeting. But at the end of the day, they elect 5 board members so that they can communicate through us and we can communicate to you, and you don't have to be tied up with all of your time in making one person happy in the community over and over. Because like you said, sometimes the more you entertain that direct communication, the more they're going to say, well, I want hot tubs and everything else, if they don't really understand budgets or understand these things. And that's my job, to understand that stuff and communicate that information back to them when they have concerns and stuff, and to let them know that I'm available to them in many ways to try to communicate their needs and wants and stuff.
I like what you said about providing options, because we were looking at Lindenwood one time, and you said, well, let's just have a blank slate and go out to the community and say, what do you want? And we kind of dial that back, considering we're the experts, at least have somewhat of a plan, and let them add things if they want to, but not let them design it, because who knows what we'd come up with.
You can do like visioning boards where you have like graphics of splash pads or some of the ideas that I think is helpful a little bit with that.
It's a long page there, you can correct it.
Yeah, I'll just ask the, So, what are the opportunities that you see moving forward?
For you or for us?
For the park district?
I think they're endless. I mean, it's just what we want to be. We have a lot of support. I just like to see us, create some of the changes, implement some of the changes, do different things, and not just, keep doing the same thing. So I think it's whatever we want it to be. We have a lot of support in Fargo. You know that from living here. I mean, they'll get behind something, and if they support something, they'll get behind it.
You mentioned earlier the essential important value added, and you talked about when you start a program, so we'll just, for example, I'll just pick kickball. So you got a kickball program, and you started in 1988, and you had 400 kids playing kickball, and as time went by, now you got 42 kids signing up. And at what point do you go, well, we're still playing kickball because that's what we do? So you had mentioned that, and that was one of the things I was interested in hearing, because it's when have you run a course, and what do you replace it with? I mean, if you were still doing the same things you were doing in 88, you wouldn't play pickleball, right? You wouldn't have some of the other things that are going on. So that's something I see, kind of going off what Rusty said is what can we do next? What can we do next? Not just saying, hey, we're there, we've got it, our parks are great, and just same old, same old.
Or and constantly evolving that. So to speak, you're playing dodgeball. You're playing kickball. The reason that nobody's signing up for kickball anymore is because 90% of the time when you play kickball, you're not actually active. I'm a PE professor, by the way. So you modified it to mat kickball, where you have 4 different mats and people are constantly playing all the time, and maybe your numbers sustain themselves.
I thought you said math.
No.
Mat. Really?
Which I won't even know the rules of, but it's acknowledging the fact that, so what I'm saying is evolution, right, of these programs. You don't have to necessarily say we're done with kickball, but maybe you're paying attention to what kickball is in 2019 and evolving your program, because I think that might be some of our concerns we've had here, is that maybe we haven't necessarily kept up with, as opposed to...
Yeah, and that's like the mini business plan that ties into that, is where you're keeping track of attendance, your expenses and revenues, survey results. I think is something else is important to make sure that surveys are being done, and then you analyze at the end of every program cycle.
So one thing the staff will say, because we have been growing a lot, the city grows out and acreage and people, user. And so one thing, they are chasing a lot of times, and so they sometimes don't have time to sit down and think about it and go, well, we only, we're down 90% in this. Should we look at that, where it's just kind of automatic? And we know that the 40 people who are still playing kickball, if we cancel it or change the program, then we're going to have 40 phone calls, and they'll be on, KFGO tomorrow. And so I think that's an opportunity that, with the staff, to be able to find a way to alleviate how things are handled internally and managed, that there are, not just in financial savings, but I think in people savings and time-wise, there's some opportunities that maybe could be looked at and so that they can think more outside the box.
Well, even on the maintenance side, looking at perhaps there's some mowed areas in the city, in the parks, that we could convert into some natural native areas that would decrease on staff time. I think, all important to look at.
I guess I just want to say, we do a great job. I don't want you to leave here thinking that I don't think we do a great job. We do a great job. I'm just always forward looking and wanting to try to get ahead of the curve. I think like Stacey said, I think sometimes we're just appear like we're in over our heads and we're just trying to keep above water and not looking for the next thing because, well, it's going to be more work and then I'm not going to be able to do what I'm supposed to be doing.
One of the things is that to me it's not an opportunity as much, it's finding the balance. And to lay out the spectrum on one end, all we can do is own property and we farm it all out to let the youth groups do all their stuff, the men's leagues, all of that, to the other end of the spectrum where we do actual programming. Where in the middle should we be? Because even on our youth side, we've got our baseball program and our hockey program and soccer. They're all being run by groups. And it used to be where the park district ran a lot of that. And so, but it seems like it's slid a little bit more towards we'll just own the property and we'll let the programs run themselves. And I'm not exactly sure where that balance should be, but it's something that it continues to evolve, and that's something I think we should be thinking about.
Well, I think just overall, in youth athletics has changed so much. In just that, kids, I think it's rare that you have kids now that are in multiple sports. There's so much of that specific sports-specific training, and I'm sure that kind of explains why, right? People are playing these sports year-round, which is neither good nor bad, but to have more of just the fun, recreation is not as I think important anymore for families, for parents. It's still important for kids to have that experience, but
It is, and that's some of the feedback I've gotten from the hockey world.
Sure.
And I mean, no offense by this, but I have some who have come and said, our family doesn't want to be in competitive hockey, but our kids want to play hockey.
Yep.
We need a rec league where they can show up, and if they have if they have a project they have to have done for school the next day, they don't have to be at practice so that they can play on the weekend. And they want the recreation of it.
And that's where I think the park district fits in very nicely in offering those types of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as the sports complex project, what are the next steps and what's the timeline for the project?
Well, we're meeting tomorrow night as a board, and we're going to take up the issue of hiring a what's the title again? A project
Construction
risk
manager?
Construction manager at risk.
Construction manager at risk. And that person will be responsible for kind of overseeing the project going forward. We're still fundraising, and part of where we're at as a board is we're waiting to continue to evolve that fundraising. We're not locked into making a specific spade in the ground kind of situation, but that will continue to move forward.
So did I see, is Irv Iniger working on behalf of the park district in fundraising? Or what?
The foundation.
The foundation, okay.
Foundation, yeah.
Did he ask you for some money?
Not yet. Okay.
That might change the salary number there.
Yeah. So has any work been done yet? Like, has a feasibility study been completed on this sports complex? I mean, do you have an idea of operational costs, preliminary construction costs, or not quite there yet? Because you don't have a design, so
Right.
So not quite.
So
we have a design.
Okay.
But it's not been priced out completely.
Okay.
In that we still have the opportunity to look at it and say, okay, we can't afford this, so we're cutting that out.
Yeah.
So we're starting out at the minimum. We talked about football-sized turf or soccer field-sized turf. 1 sheet ice, 2 sheets ice, 4 courts, 6 courts, 8 courts, walking track. I mean, move the staff out there. I mean, all these things are kind of all playing into the mix, but we haven't decided. They're just building it, they're pricing it, and then we'll get when we get closer to the construction part of it, we'll be able to decide what we're going to have in the bank and what we're going to decide to build. Does
What we can sustain. without causing
Yep.
financial strain.
I think really the other questions that I had written down, you've kind of answered. It was really, the biggest challenges facing the executive director coming in. And I know, Stacey, you talked about just kind of that staff piece, trying to kind of get the staff calmed and kind of back in a position where everyone's working together and understanding the direction. Is there any other challenges that the board sees for this position that you'd like to share?
Other than us?
It's not going to scare me off.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Hey, I had very little sleep last night, so.
Which is really fun.
I think it was touched on originally a little bit, but I think that, the staff just feels uncertain.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it any better
Yeah.
than that, and this goes back,
Yep.
for quite some time. So they just, it's just uncertainty, and,
Yeah.
as if when you were in that interim position, that's a hard time for the staff and stuff. So that'll be challenges to
Yeah. I actually had the opportunity today in one of my meetings is to meet with all of the programming facilities and event staff. So it was a big group. There was probably 14 people, and we talked a little bit about that. And you're right on. I mean, it's kind of in flux right now. So so that's very accurate.
I mean, we've told them go watch business, make
Yeah.
decisions as if,
Keep
but
sharp.
they don't. They've said that they
Ready
need a vision and an answer
Yep.
and whatever before they're going to feel comfortable moving forward.
I'd say one of the challenges that I would see is there's a natural north side, and there's a natural south side, and then there's a natural further south side, and they all want their piece of the pie. And while you think we're just the city of Fargo, there are some distinct community areas, and it's how do you build something that far away that those people feel they're part of? And there's a few things in the community that certain groups and certain neighborhoods have really important ownership of. So it's just making sure everybody feels like they're getting their attention.
Yeah.
Very true.
And that's probably no different than maybe your East and West Bloomington.
Yeah. Well, even in Edina is, I think, only about 50,000 people. It's the same. Whether you're living in, each of the 4 quadrants, it's kind of how they look at Edina, and it was the same. It was the same
I
struggle.
think we touched on this, but, when Roger retired, all our directors have been here forever.
Yeah.
And so, especially as a new person coming in, to continue to lead and bring what you want to do and your vision to the table without losing
Yeah.
the people behind, because I think that may be what happened with our previous executive director. He got too far out in front and saw that people weren't behind him.
Yeah.
And because they've been here forever, so cheese would get moved a lot.
Yeah.
So that's that navigation of how you do that, keep pulling them along, but don't get too far out in front. That's the tricky part. That'll be the success or failure factor.
Let me ask you of your day. I mean, how was aligned, and did you get a good chance to understand the district?
Yeah.
I know it's been a long day.
It has. But no, I was just going to thank you, because I know that this probably was a challenge to put together the schedule and the itinerary for 5 people coming in. And I appreciate how thoughtful you were in putting this together. And it was really valuable for me today to be able to spend some time with the staff. I was at a couple of the facilities, but I had been to the facilities. I toured the park system a few times in preparing for this. But really having the one-on-one conversations about what's going on in the department, what are kind of the challenges, was really helpful for me. So so thank you. It was a good day.
Excellent.
Good meetings.
I'll look at the end. I think we'll do a debrief quick. Break.
I think
You're-
My off-
you are, time to cool, yeah, take a deep breath.
It's 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Time management, there you go.
So did you drive?
I did.
Or are you going
yeah.
back
Are you going
tonight,
home
tomorrow?
today?
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure. It was going to snow. It's supposed to snow in the cities tonight.
Oh.
And I wasn't sure how far west, and between here and.
It's the furthest.
So maybe you're in
Oh,
furthest.
you're right.
Oh.
Yeah. So I guess I still haven't decided because I haven't looked at the forecast today.
Sure.
So I may spend one more night and get it early tomorrow.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's nice meeting you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I love
5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
through the whole thing.
She's like a star on it. She does great.
Thanks. Very much appreciated.
Well, I'm glad everything worked out.
Yeah.
Susan and.
We have to go back to.
Well, we'll go back to what we're
I
going to
just
say.
want I just want to make sure. Huh?
Did not.
No, we don't start this tomorrow.
I thought, oh, you say
Before we put them back.
Yeah, that'll teach you. I guess when I say tomorrow, they just started for after 4 meeting. If you have a Monday night class, then it's only once a week. So if we start, so they really need to give Mondays off. It's just that they don't want to give somebody the whole week off. That
Do
makes
you
sense.
want our scoring sheets collected?
I will. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Travel safely home.
All right. So on top of my dad falling and fracturing, Peter's stranded in Seoul, South Korea on his way to Manila,
Huh.
where the volcano is.
Erupting.
Yikes.
If we were playing Pictionary, I would assume it's erupting.
So if I see
Either that or the volcano is in a tornado. One of the two.
So I'm a little distracted.
Sure.
So we're staying here?
Yeah, for 5 or 10 minutes just to do a hot wash.
Okay.
We can stay in executive session for that. Quite confident.
I don't know what our plan is, but I would like to propose that, and I don't know, we were thinking we're gonna turn these in after each one. I want to keep mine.
That's what Diana suggested, but we can ask her.
Because I may change, first to last, and how we grade them, and I don't know if she really needs them to enter, but.
I got in their initial round, I graded them all at the same time because it was easier for me. I kept my notes, and I sketched out what I thought,
Right.
but I didn't until I had a final, because it makes a difference to look at the whole.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it does.
Sorry.
That's what I want to be.
So wait till the end.
I would like to.
Okay, we can ask her. So I thought we'd just do 5 or 10 minute kind of hot wash debrief. And since I saw her on the first round, and I would say even fill in, but she did a lot better job today than she did first round.
Yeah, had I not known that you had said that the first time, I would have never known there would have ever been a problem.
Right.
Speaks very well, communicates well,
Yep.
is thoughtful with her answers.
Professional.
Good presence.
Yep.
I think she might need to read your face when she talks to know how much more to give or whatever. Like I felt like she was really good at that, so that may be why she didn't.
Well, we were on video, so you could see. It's not the same as being in person.
No.
Yeah, it's a little tough. I've never done a Skype interview.
Me either.
It's different than in person.
Right.
But did someone say, so she interviewed and then did she call afterward?
It was an email afterward. She's like,
And knew that she didn't do very well?
yeah, she apologized for doing a terrible job in the interview, starting with the first question. I'm like, why would you do that? And it's like I told Vicky, she probably realized she put herself in a fourth and long position, so she was just going to go for the Hail Mary. And either, because we talked about that before we advanced her, what was her goal with doing that? And then we just kind of came back.
she figured if she didn't, call attention to it, she wasn't gonna make the next round.
Well, it was
Like that's
similar to
what it
her email that she sent. Instead of hoping for the best, she first tried to see if she could resend it. When she didn't, she got a hold of the person before that person read it and was able to smooth it all. So when you read it, it's completely different than if you had read it without talking to her first.
Right, headed off to the pass.
Yep.
Well,
And I think it goes to her very
self-awareness is-
competitive nature
It
too.
does.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're off to a great start.
I think she'd be, I didn't see anything there that I would go, ooh, I don't know. The only thing that might, you look at her years of experience, and she's not maybe isn't many years, what is it, like 12 to 14, compared
I think
to,
the Y experience though translate to some of what we do.
Yeah.
I wonder if she was at all interested in this Y position. I wasn't going to ask her, but when
yeah.
Paul left
Sure.
and Steve came,
Sure.
that was anything.
I
Well,
thought it
because
was
she obviously went from one Y to another Y. Because she
Right.
went from the Kentucky Y to the cities.
Right.
So
That's
she,
like the
she
fact that-
stays in the family of some freight of sorts.
I also like the fact that she gave the answer that you're supposed to give in an interview when Vicky asked her, when you saw this before that kid, would you get? No. And then all of a sudden she's talking, she's like, well, no, actually, there's some valuable experience. I thought that was pretty cool because the right answer for an interview is the, no, I wouldn't have, but at the same time, I'm the person that's going to
Well, yeah. The timing of it, it's pretty hard to, that's almost a speculative question because it would be different if she got offered this job.
Exactly.
The day before.
I wouldn't have not taken the job.
Yeah.
But if it's the job opened up.
Bird in the hand, two in the bush.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it
This,
sounds like she's truly interested in coming
Yes.
back to Fargo when she looked
Absolutely.
into this.
And she
Three
tried to,
Well,
yeah,
well, I don't say that, but I'm saying you still keep your bird in your hand.
right, that's exactly, that was what I was getting at.
Yeah, and I don't fault her for taking the job. I was
No.
just curious
No.
what her answer would be. I was
No, I-
curious
yeah.
how she would have that conversation because she was obviously brought to Bloomington by her previous boss.
Right.
And so she's got someone she's got some loyalty to, obviously.
Well, and it
And
was,
she went there because of that person, I would guess, would be part of it. She knew what leader she was getting too. So
search
there's a
committee,
lot to that.
search committee was kind of speculating why she was the interim, and then she was going, she answered that,
Yeah.
leaving, so that's all good.
And she was adamant that she was not a candidate for that job to the point of like you could call them if you want and ask if she was a candidate for the job. Which,
Well, they're both on her references.
Yep.
Anne at Bloomington and Terry
Yeah.
at
Yeah, yeah.
No?
So she's
so
obviously
you
forthcoming
did
with
So
that.
that back, yep. Do we want to wrestle with Diane about the spreadsheets?
Well, but if I need to turn one in, it's going to be in pencil because I'd like to see all of them at the end. And I may change again.
I think it's going to be awful hard to score someone today and have a fair enough number system to say, well,
Linear room.
okay, did I give you enough room to go above or below?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to fill mine out, but I'd like to keep mine. I kind of like that idea of a pencil and even a range.
All right.
Bring your deal there.
I'm not sure to turn that off. According to this document, we were supposed to write down the time we went to executive session. Did you do that, Jeff? Oh, great.
Good to have a good secretary.
And then the minutes will show that the executive session was adjourned at, we'll just say 5:10 PM. And the public is invited to return to the meeting room, and we are now back in open session. There we go. So there's a question that's been raised, Diane, and I asked you to come over here about the score sheet. And people wanting, to wait till we've had all 5 candidates and score them relative to each other. And so I asked you to come here and talk to us about that.
I thought on the scoring sheet is that you're not rating the candidates against each other, you're rating each candidate as themselves. So they each get whatever score for previous experience, cultural fit management, they just get that score. It is no varying
Is there any urgency in giving them tonight, knowing that you have another 4 interviews? And I actually want to just think about it some more, and we really haven't had time to digest it. And I'd rather just think about it before I score it and turn it in, whether it's competing against them.
That you score it prior to meeting another candidate, so that the candidates don't get mixed up.
Sure, so we could bring it and hand it to you before the Wednesday interview
Correct.
and before the Friday interview.
Yes, absolutely.
I at least, that gives me a little time to wrap my brain
Okay.
around it. I think that's a good idea. And then, in the end, the scoring helps us, but it's not the end-all be-all, correct?
Yeah, it's just a guide.
It's
Yeah.
a tool to help
Yep.
in the decision-making process.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Everybody good with that?
And then should we hand these into you individually? I mean, each one of us, or is Jerry collecting them, or how do you want to collect them?
I don't think it matters.
Well, Don't be tracking, you'll be tracking us down.
I'm gonna come in the building, I'm gonna walk into our office, hand it, I'm gonna take the stairs, come over, then we'll take the stairs back, and then we'll take the stairs here again.
I can certainly collect them, but if you want to give them to Diane on her own, that's fine by me.
I just want to make sure she has 5 each time.
As long as you have your name on yours.
Any other issues, any other questions?
No.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.